Hi. So good day. This would be our first video lesson. So this video is a PowerPoint presentation or a video lesson on an introduction to culture in general. So the title of the presentation is Culture and Society. So yeah. So actually this is a new video. I've stopped uploading the first video lesson because when I watched it again, it looks so awful. The allergies are so bad. So I don't think that would be a really informative video for you since I look so sick in that video. So I have repeated the discussion all over again. So this is going to be a new video lesson of the same topic. So I'm really sorry for the inconveniences, for the delays. Ngayon na ulit bumalik yung internet namin. So I'm grabbing the chance to have or to record a video lesson. I'm really sorry class for all the inconveniences na nangyari ngayong week. But I'm always welcome for you guys. If you have any questions, you just PM me. We can extend the online conference if you have any questions because ideally by this week or this weekend, we're going to have our first quiz if you have understood all the lessons in this video lesson. And if you have read the module, because the PowerPoint presentation is going to be just a review or a supplementary video lesson for the contents of the module. So it's really important that you read and annotate the module. Okay, so let's start. So actually, we're just going to browse the previous discussions that we've had. So you have, a little bit of a refresh and of course, para din sa kapakanan ng mga klase nyo na hindi naka-join nung simula nung ating online conference from last time, okay? Okay, so now let's have from last time we've already discussed this one. So what comes to your mind when you hear the word culture? So some of your classmates and recited dynamic, tribes, or changing, identity. Okay, so there are lots of things that we could associate to the word culture, and some of those might be tradition, identity, tribes, or pride. Of course, when we say culture, most of the time we have traditions. That's why we closely relate the word tradition to culture. What else? Identity. Of course, when we have our own culture, it gives us and our own people a sense of identity in which we identify ourselves from any other cultures out there. Okay, so it gives us a sense of identity. Now, when we have a sense of identity, naturally, we have a sense of pride because parang pag nakita natin yon, it's something that is ours. So in some way that shows pride. And of course, tribes. Now, why do we associate tribes to culture? Simply because when we say culture, this is something that is uphold or is becoming upholded by the people in a certain group. So for example, the tribes, they are an example of an undiluted cultural setting or cultural setups. So pag observe natin yung mga tribes, 'di ba? Sila kasi parang talagang na-preserve ng maigi yung kanilang mga traditions, customs, as well as their clothing, 'di ba? Pati yung mga bahay, pati yung mga pangalan sometimes. So makikita natin na-highlight talaga doon yung culture because it's pure, it's undiluted, and it's protected in the tribes. That's why we associate the word culture to tribes. Pero there are a lot of things that we can associate to culture. Hindi lang naman tong apat na words na ito. So, eto, tinignan natin nung nakaraan yung mga different cultures around the world. So, if you can remember, this culture or this part of the Indian culture is what we call as Suti or Sati, wherein Suti or Sati is a kind of act that shows the devotion of a wife to a husband. So they believe that in order to show the loyalty of the wife to the wife must join the husband even in death. And so the wife is joining her husband in the funeral pyre. Okay? So again, pag sinabi nating pyre, ito yung piled up stacks of wood tapos sisilaban. So aapuyan natin yon. So we call that as pyre, okay? In the funeral pyre, the wife will join the husband. Now, why are they doing that again? So, they do that for three reasons. Number one, to show the devotion of a wife to a husband. As the wedding vows say, or as the wedding vows say, di ba masasabi natin doon, till death do us part. So, they believe that even in death, the wife and the husband should not be separated. So, might as well the wife would join the husband. So, kahit napatay na yung husband. So, number two is that they believe in reincarnation. So, for example, if they die together, they believe that if they're going to be reborn again in another body, chances are they are going to be together in their second life or in their next life as husband and wife again. So, magkasama na naman sila. So, gusto nila na magkasama silang mamatay para pag nabuhay sila ulit, sila pa rin yung magkasama sa susunod na habang buhay. At yung pangatlo namang reason is because they believe that a woman who is already widowed, so siya ay isang byuda na, so maagang namatay yung asawa niyang lalaki, nauna pa sa kanya, they believe that those kinds of women are bad luck or bad omen. So, ibig sabihin, hindi na sila liligawan ulit or mababa yung chances na mag-aasawa sila ulit. Bakit? Kasi nga, sila ay parang tinuturing na bad luck na kung yung asawa niya dati ay namatay ng mas maaga sa kanya, baka ako rin kapag ginawa ko siyang asawa. So, may mga ganong klaseng connotations. That's why they are avoiding widows. So, hindi na nila inaasawa ulit yung mga widows doon. So, ibig sabihin, might as well, again, join the dead husband. At least doon, sa susunod na lifetime nila, masaya sila ulit kasi magiging magkasama sila ulit. So, that is an example of a culture in India. So, ma'am, iba yung culture nila sa atin. Siyempre, kasi hindi naman tayo Indian. They have a different culture from us. Okay, next, we have this picture showing firewalking. So, itong firewalking, ginagawa din natin siya dito sa Pilipinas. Pero yung sa atin kasi, yung firewalking natin ay more likely to show the blessing of the gods, like the immunity given to us by the gods. So, ang example nun is sa mga probinsya, some religious groups or some religious cults, they are wearing anting-anting. Ngayon, para sa kanila, kapag sila ay nakasuot ng anting-anting, sila ay safe or sila ay immune from danger. So, yun yung mga examples natin ng instances kung saan sila ay nagkakaroon ng firewalking. So, suot-suot nila yung anting-anting, tapos sila ay lumalakad sa mga baga or sa apoy, tapos papakita nila na they came out without a burn, without a scratch. Okay, so that is the context of firewalking in the Philippines. Now, what about this picture in particular? So, ito ay nanggaling sa Northwest China. Okay, so if you can observe, ito, merong small pair of shoes dito. Ano kaya tong bitbit nila? So, in Northwest China, they believe that for a child to be safe from danger or from other influences, otherworldly influences, the parents must offer sacrifice for the gods, and then pag natanggap yun ng gods, they would accept it, and then in return they are going to protect their children. Okay, so ito yung silbi ng firewalking dun sa Northwest China. So ang ginagawa nila, from the gate of the backyard to the front porch or the main door of the house, sila ay maglalakad papunta doon. Syempre, barefooted on live coals, katulad na nakikita natin dito sa picture. Tapos, pasan-pasan nila yung kanilang mga anak. Bakit nila ginagawa yon? Kasi para nga sa kultura nila, kapag ginawa nila yon, makikita ng mga gods yung hardships ng magulang. Kaya parang sabihin nila na matatouch sila dun sa ginawa ng mga magulang. Kaya in return, they would protect the children or the child na kinarga ng magulang. So, yun yung ginagawa nilang firewalking. So, we can see, in our culture, it is only an act of parang immunity given to us by the gods. Whereas sa kanila naman, it's an act of sacrifice of the parent for the child. But nevertheless, may pagkakapareho din yung mga kultura natin. Bakit? We still believe that the gods offer protection or immunity of some sort. Okay, next, child marriages. So child marriages child marriages are one of the most controversial practices in the whole world. Why? Because again, we are trying to marry two children together. Now, the question is, do they have any knowledge of what really marriage is? Do they have a concrete idea of what a married life is? Or do they have how do they know how to assume responsibility of a husband to a wife, or how to assume responsibility of a wife to a husband? So by this age, kita natin sobrang bata pa nila. By this age, probably they still don't know, or they don't still grasp the totality of the concept of what a marriage is. So siguro para sa kanila, ito ay ginagawa nila dahil ito yung gusto ng mga magulang nila, or ito yung parte ng kultura nila, or halos lahat ng mga kakilala nila ganito din yung setup na nangyari, okay? So, kung sa kultura nila normal 'yon, siyempre para sa kultura natin at sa ibang mga kultura pa, ito ay hindi isang normal na bagay. That's why international agencies and international governments, international organizations, they are trying their best to stop this kind of practice. Kasi nga, it's like we are taking away the freedom of these children. What if they want to pursue a career na kailangan nila ng oras? Ibig sabihin, hindi nila magagampanan yung duties nila as a wife. What if gusto nila na may iba silang tao na gustong i-pursue? May nakilala sila and then they want to pursue that person. They cannot pursue that person anymore because they're already married. And to think that they are married without their consent because they don't understand the concept of consent yet. Okay? So those kinds of issues arise in child marriages. That's why people around the globe, majority of them are trying to stop this kind of practice. Now, why does it still persist? Because, of course, it's their culture. For them, it's normal. Okay? For them, it's normal. So it's totally okay for them to continue this. So again, we can see that their culture is different from ours because for them it's okay, but for us probably it's not okay. Okay? Next, Yulin Dog Festival. Again, this is one of the most controversial festivals out there in the whole world. So we have in China, in Yulin, China. So what do they do in Yulin dog festivals is that they sell dog meat and they eat dogs. Okay. So, which is totally different from here in the Philippines, because here in the Philippines, we treat dogs as our family, as our friends, as our companions, as our beloved pets, okay, as our guardians. So, kumbaga, close talaga tayo sa mga aso. Pero sa kanila, sa Yulin, China, they just treat dogs like livestock. So, just how we treat chickens, pork, beef, 'di ba? Inuulam natin sa araw-araw, isda. Sa kanila parang gano'n din yung aso. So, kapag pumunta kayo sa Yulin Market, pagpunta kayo sa Yulin Market, makikita nyo yung mga body parts ng mga aso, mga nakasabit, mga tinitinda, kinikilo. Parang kapares din ng baboy pag may bili tayo. So, makikita natin, 'di ba? Parang sa atin, it's horrendous. It's tragic. Okay, it's upsetting. Why? Because here in our culture, we treat dogs um with compassion. While in their case, in their culture, dog is just a meat, a kind of meat. Okay? So makikita natin doon, iba tayo ng kultura. Sa kanila, okay yon. Sa atin, hindi. Okay? So again, we have the culture of Yulin, especially here in Yulin Dog Festival. So for this picture, rather, this next picture, I'm really sorry for those people na medyo sensitive. I've already blurred it out. I've already put a black box on the face of the child, and I've also edited the picture to make it grayscale or black and white because it's so graphic. This topic is so sensitive. So this one is about female circumcision. So in my previous discussions in other sections, I have not included female circumcision, right? So let me now discuss female circumcision. What is female circumcision? So basically, you are going to remove the clitoris if you are familiar with that part of the female genitalia. So you're going to remove the clitoris, which is an erogenous zone. Now, why are they removing that? Because they believe that in order for women to be sexually gratified or sexually satisfied, it must be the job of the male. Okay, so it has to be through penetration, so That is the reason why they are removing the clitoris, because the clitoris could be used for masturbation. So they are using, or they are removing that, because for them, masturbation is something which is sinful. Okay? So parang ganun yung nangyayari. Kaya nila tinatanggal yon to lessen the sin of the woman. So, kaya nila tinatanggal yung clitoris. Now, these practices are done in the outskirts of Africa and South America. And most of the time, the people who are doing female circumcision are not licensed physicians, not licensed doctors. They are just village elders, or they are just the elders in the culture or in the society. Now, what are they doing, or what are they using? So they are using blades. Okay? So they are using blades. Like yung blade na pang-ahit sa atin, ayun, yun ang ginagamit nila. Blades, or even used knives or scalpels which are not sterilized. Ibig sabihin, hindi sila nilinis. So sometimes there is the fear of contamination and infection. And in fact, maraming namamatay na patients ng female circumcision because of, number one, bleeding. Kasi nga, dahil wala naman silang correct procedure, they're just cutting it and waiting for it to heal. So nangyari, they die from bleeding. Number two, they die from infection because, again, unhealthy yung practices, hindi siya malinis. And number three is because batang-bata pa yung mga nag-undergo ng female circumcision. So sila ay nag-range from 6 years old to 12 years old. Okay? So katulad na nandito sa picture, makikita natin, sobrang liit pa niya, batang-bata pa siya, pero siya ay sinasubject na to female circumcision. Just imagine the pain. And they do it without anesthesia. And even though tapos na yung operation, you still have to live with the pain kasi nga you don't have any anesthesia. Unlike here in the Philippines, male circumcision is normal here in the Philippines, but it is being done through clean practices, and most of the time nagpapatuli sa hospital, or yung mga doctor and nurses yung nagtutuli, and afterwards ino-offeran sila ng gamot, or nireresetahan sila ng gamot, or kung ano man yung pwedeng pain relievers. Pero just imagine this, bata pa siya pero wala siyang pain relievers, okay? Just imagine how painful this is. So, bakit nila 'to ginagawa, ma'am? Bakit hindi nila tinitigil 'yun? Kasi nasasaktan na yung mga bata. Again, it's because it's considered as normal in their culture. As simple as that. The way that the male circumcision is normal here in the Philippines, gano'n din sa kanila. Para sa kanila, it's a normal coming of age ceremony. That's why it still persists. Sadly, yes. Pero kadalasan din ng mga international organizations, they're trying to stop this kind of practice. So, Thanksgiving. Ito ay sineselebrate sa USA. So, in the Philippines, we don't have a separate day for Thanksgiving like Thanksgiving Day. But in the US, they have a separate day for Thanksgiving. Okay? Sa atin kasi all-in na eh. Pag Pasko, Thanksgiving na, reunion na, Pasko pa, 'di ba? Minsan may birthday pa, sinasabay na doon kapag malapit na sa Pasko. Or pag New Year, ganun din. So, reunion din, Thanksgiving din, kainan din. Okay? So, all-in celebration na. Hanukkah is a Jewish tradition, so it is being celebrated by Jewish people. So this is being done parang as a festival of lights, or parang ginagawa nila as celebration and commemoration of the Temple of Jerusalem being rebuilt. Common na kultura, parte ng kultura natin sa Pilipinas, we have pagmamano. So again, we have different ways on how to show respect. Okay, so in other countries, especially in Korea and Japan or East Asia, they bow in order to show respect. But here in the Philippines, when we show respect, most of the time we do the pagmamano. So, makikita natin dito na meron tayong sense of identity. Kasi pag nakita natin na merong nagmamano, automatically, we know that this person is Filipino, or probably, pinalaki siya ng mga Pilipino kasi siya ay nagmamano. Next is UP. So, makikita natin dito sa UP, they have a different culture. Say, for example, when they want something to be addressed, they openly and explicitly show their vigorous want to address this kind of issue or topic. So, pag may gusto silang ipaalam talaga sa publiko or ipaalam, talagang sila ay nagkakaroon ng mga bandera, nagrarally sila, ganyan. So, hindi nila, kumbaga, hindi sila patago. Talagang straight to the point nilang sinasabi kung anong gusto nila with the use of course, rallies and tawag nito, yung mga movements na ginagawa nila. And it's welcome in their school. Sa kanila, normal lang yon. So, hindi sila sinisita, hindi sila sinasaway dun sa kanila because it's their culture. But here, in our school, in PLV, so we are not recommended to do rallies. Ano yung ginagawa natin sa PLV? If we have some grievances or if we have some concerns, we do this chain of organization starting from the bottom. So, ang nangyayari is kapag may concern ka, sasabihin mo sa president, si president sasabihin sa first year representative, si first year representative sasabihin naman kay president, kay org president, organization president, yung org nyo mismo, parang yung sa club nyo, sasabihin kay organization president, si org president naman sasabihin kay advisor, si advisor sasabihin kay chairperson, si chairperson, tsaka si president sasabihin kay grievances committee sa OSA, tapos si OSA naman sasabihin naman kay Vice President of Academic Affairs, and then si Vice President of Academic Affairs, sasabihin siya kay President. So, makikita natin, tayo, hindi tayo explicitly na pag may gusto tayo, sasabihin natin agad-agad na right away, na may mga bandera tayo. So, we try to address it through a formal chain of responsibility, katulad nga nung nabanggit ko. So, iba tayo, iba yung sistema natin sa school, iba din yung sistema nila sa school. Why? Because we have different cultures, okay? Even in schools, we have different cultures. Now, let's have a formal definition of what culture is. So, culture, again, is a merged set of learned behaviors, beliefs, and characteristics. Again, we don't have culture springing from nowhere, okay? So, hindi naman parang kung saan lang nanggaling na parang kabute na tumutubo ang culture. Ito ay, syempre, natututunan. Pag natutunan natin to, pagsasamahin. Ang kultura hindi nanggagaling sa iisang tao. Ang kultura ay nanggagaling sa iba't ibang tao, tas pag samasamahin natin lahat ng natutunan ng mga tao na yon sa isang grupo, doon manggagaling si culture. Now, learned behaviors, beliefs, and characteristics. Kanino natin na tututunan or nalalaman? From older generations being passed down to us, and now we are going to pass it to the next generation. Okay? So, pasa-pasa po siyang nangyayari. So, natututunan natin siya sa mga nakapaligid sa atin, sa mga nakakatanda sa atin. Ngayon, kung ano yung natutunan natin sa sarili natin, yun ay ipapasa natin sa mga susunod na generation. Probably pamangkin natin, mga anak natin, mga apo natin. Okay? And is a set of commonly shared standards that models the perception of people about how other people should act or look like. So, culture has the power to dictate or to mandate ano yung dapat nating ikilos, ano yung dapat nating gawin, ano dapat tayo. Okay? So, meron tayong standards na sinusunod within a culture. To emphasize the previous bullet, culture guides people on what to do, what not to do, or what is right and what is wrong. So, again, culture has this power to actually dictate something is right and something is wrong. So, pwede niyang sabihin kung ano yung tama at mali. So, based on the views of the members of society. So, ito yung tinatawag natin na norms, which will be discussed later. Okay? So, again, meron tayong tinatawag na standards na sinusunod. Halimbawa, dito sa ating culture sa Pilipinas, divorce. So for Western culture, it's quite okay for them that if you feel that your marriage is ruining you psychologically, physically, emotionally, pagka yun ay hindi na healthy para sa'yo, yung marriage ninyo, sa Western culture, it's all right to have a divorce. Kasi imbes na masira ka, pwede kang makipag-divorce, okay, to prevent that. And that's totally fine. People accept it. But here in the Philippines or in Asian setting, most of the time, divorce is uh, not accepted, especially here in the Philippines because we are following the Christian religion. So now, ang nangyayari sa atin dito sa Pilipinas, when we say about divorce, hindi applicable or hindi advisable sa atin yung pagdi-divorce. Mas gugustuhin dito sa kultura natin sa Pilipinas, mas gugustuhin pa natin na kahit mahirap yung relasyon or kahit mahirap yung relasyon ng mag-asawa, talagang ipipilit lang talaga na magtiyaga sa isa't isa kasi yung divorce ay hindi pwedeng gawin. And tingin sa society, yung divorce is something that is not a good thing to do. Okay? So, ganun yung example natin sa culture. Sa isang kultura, meron tayong sinasabi na tama at mali. Okay? So, may explain natin yan later on kapag nag-explain na tayo about norms. Next, culture gives identity to a particular group of people, which makes them distinct from other groups of peoples. Again, culture gives us identity. Okay? Next, culture binds a social group or social system together in order to create a sense of uniformity and coherence. So let's emphasize binds a social group or social system and creates a sense of uniformity and coherence. So to emphasize, culture has this power to unite people of the same culture. So, another example is pagka OFW, makikita natin yung mga documentaries about OFWs and especially you, kapag may kakilala kayong OFWs or may OFW kayo sa pamilya. Pagpunta nila doon sa ibang bansa, makikita nyo doon na or siguro nakwento na nila sa inyo or nakita nyo na syempre totally foreign. Lahat ng bagay maninibago sila. So, yun yung mga panahon na medyo na homesick pa sila, ganyan. Ngayon, everybody is a stranger to them. Pero kapag meron silang nakita na kapwa Pilipino, automatically parang ang gaan ng loob nila doon sa kapwa nila Pilipino. Bakit? Kasi nandun yung power ng culture, again, na nagbabind ng mga members ng same culture. So, upon learning that another person is a member of your own culture, parang may sense doon na nagbabind sa inyo together, na magkasing kultura kayong dalawa, that's why you should stick together. Yun yung tinatawag nating pakikipagkapwa. Alam mo sa sarili mo, sa puso mo, na itong tao na to ay kapwa mo. Bakit? Kasi pares kayo ng pinagmulang kultura. Okay? So, yun yung tinatawag natin na the power of culture to bind a social group and to form a sense of uniformity and coherence. Now, we have this concept, what we call as cultural relativism. So, when we say relativism, this is another term for subjectivity. When we say something is subjective, we say that you don't know which is the correct thing or which is the right thing to do, and you cannot judge it because you don't know again which is right and which is wrong. So again, we have subjective when you say relative. To put it into cultural setting, so cultural relativism is the varying views, practices, and moral codes in different cultural setups. So ito yung, in short, pag sinabi natin cultural relativism, ito yung point kung saan makikita natin na yung kultura, bawat kultura sa iba't ibang bahagi ng mundo ay magkakaiba. So, sometimes, what are valid in a certain culture may be invalidated in another culture. So, sa atin pwede, sa kanila bawal. Or sa kanila pwede, sa atin bawal. Halimbawa, sa Muslim culture, it's quite okay for them or it's okay for them to have multiple wives as long as they deem it necessary and as long as they can support every wife na meron sila. Okay? So, pwedeng umabot ng 3 yung legal mong asawa sa kanila. Pero sa atin, sa Pilipinas, hindi pwede yon. Okay? Isang asawa lang ang pwedeng maging legal. The rest, illegal na yon, kabit na yon. So, para kumbaga, magkakaiba tayo ng kultura. Sa kanila, accepted yung multiple wives. Sa atin, hindi. Okay? So, doon natin nakikita yung cultural relativism. Okay? Magkakaiba yung mga kultura. Another, cultural relativism points out that culture cannot be judged objectively and declared better or worse than the other. You cannot judge objectively. You cannot say that, yung kultura nyo, mali yan eh. Dapat itong kultura namin sundin nyo. Hindi pwede. Kasi, cultural relativism exists. Okay? And cultural uniqueness exists. So, yun nga, hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na itong kultura na to ay tama or mali. Kasi again, culture is relative. Next, the moral code of people is shaped by their society. Therefore, there is no objective right and wrong that holds all humanity, nor it is universal. So, another explanation as to why we cannot objectively look at culture because it is subjective or relative. And lastly, when we say cultural relativism, it stresses that tolerance must be held by people in order to come into terms despite having different cultures. So again, we see we have different cultures. Now, we must learn to tolerate other cultures because if not, we are going to have a lot of conflicts arising. Mag-aaway-away yung mga kultura natin kasi hindi tayo magkasundo. So ngayon, kung hindi natin siya kayang i-accept, at least we have to tolerate. So, kumbaga, maintain a civil relationship with other cultures, even if you don't agree to them all the time. Okay? So, again, we must learn respect. So, in order to emphasize the cultural relativity, so makikita natin, let's ask this question. What is the standard of beauty? And here, we will see the answers of different culture. So, kumuha lang tayo ng dalawang examples dito or tatlong examples kung isasama natin yung atin. So, what is the standard of beauty? For the people of the Kayan tribe in Myanmar, the standard of beauty is the neck. Okay, the longer your neck is, the more beautiful you are. So for their or in their culture, their standard of beauty is the length of the neck. So that's why they are using or wearing neck rings. So the material is made up of brass or gold. So mabigat po ba 'yon? Yes, mabigat siya. So imagine the pain. Bakit nila 'to ginagawa? It's because it's their standard of beauty, okay? So, of course, in order to achieve a certain goal or to become beautiful, you have to sacrifice some things. So, kahit naman dito sa Pilipinas iba yung standard of beauty natin, pero we are also doing some kinds of sacrifices in order to become beautiful. But for the people of Kayan tribe, it's the length of their neck. That's why they are willing to wear these neck rings. Now, the question is, ang neck ba nila ay talagang humahaba? So, yun ang diniscuss sa tinong nakaraan. The answer is no. Hindi humaba ang kanilang leeg. Anong nangyayari? So, yung collarbone po nila, imbis na straight, ang collarbone nila, nagiging letter U ang kanilang collarbone. Nade-deform siya. Okay? Kaya, nag-create siya ng illusion na mahaba yung leeg. Kasi, di ba, hindi mo pa rin pahabaan yung leeg mo since you only have a certain number of bones in your body. Okay? So, anong nangyayari? It just extends. It creates the illusion like that because the collarbone is being deformed. Masakit po ba yun? Oh, syempre, masakit yon. Pero yun nga, because it is their standard of beauty, they are doing that. Next, what about in China? Okay? So, in China, we call this as, okay, the practice is foot binding. But the kind of feet is called lotus feet. Okay? So, makikita natin talagang deformed ang kanilang paa. Ito yung mga fingers. Pumasok na siyang ganon. Okay? Now, bakit nila ginagawa ito? It's because their standard of beauty is their feet. Okay? The size of their feet, to be precise. Okay, so here we can see that their feet are, or her foot is deformed. Now, why are they doing this again? It's because it's their standard of beauty. Okay, so this is their standard of beauty. And even though it's really painful to do this, they have no choice because if they want to be beautiful, they have to follow these standards dictated by their culture. So, yung sinasabi natin na meron tayong standards talaga sa kultura, sa isang kultura. So, their standards of beauty or their standard of beauty is their foot. So, makikita natin yung cultural relativity dito. Bakit? Magkakaiba yung kultura. Yun yung sinasabi natin pag cultural relativity Para sa Myanmar, it's their neck. Para sa China, it's their foot. Okay? Or feet. Now, the question is, sa atin, sa Pilipinas, what is the standard of beauty in our culture? So, is it the glass skin? Is it the light complexion? Or is it the sexy body? Or lahat? So, alin dito yung ating standard of beauty? So, sa ngayon, feeling ko glass skin eh. Yung nagiging trend ngayon. Parang everybody wants to have glass skin. Ako rin gusto ko rin ng glass skin. Pero, hindi ko ma-achieve. So, light complexion. Nung bata ako, ito yung talagang gusto ng mga Pilipino kadalasan. So, they don't care if, kung may mga tigyawat ka or freckles or something. Basta maputi ka. Kaya, nung bata ako, kaliwat kanan yung ginagamit ng nanay ko tsaka ng tita ko ng mga pampaputing products because they want to be fair-skinned. And of course, sexy body. Probably in the Western cultures, ito yung mas emphasized yung sexy body for them. Like long legs, flat tummy, big boobs, ganyan, no hip dips. Yun yung parang sa kanila, yung standard of beauty. So again, for every culture, we have different standards of beauty, only emphasizing cultural relativity or cultural relativism. Another example is we have even the types of houses or the kinds of houses or architectural designs. Makikita natin magkakaiba yung per culture. So in the East Asian culture, we have these kinds of architecture. For Western cultures, we have this kind of architecture. And for Filipino architecture or traditional Filipino houses, we have, of course, made of wood and mga sawali, ganyan, or nipa. So, of course, even in schools, katulad nga sabi ko kanina, we have a different culture. So, for example, we have in PUP. Okay, so we have in PUP. So, sa kanila, we know that they don't have any uniform. So, they are always wearing casual wear. Pero, ina-allow din sa kanila yung wearing of short shorts like these. Okay? Sa atin sa PLV, kahit na concert lang yung atenan or kahit na bigayan lang ng card, bawal pa rin kayo mag-short ng ganyang kaikli. Bakit? Kasi sa kultura nila, okay yon, tinatanggap yon. Pero sa kultura natin sa PLV, we are conservative eh. Hindi acceptable yung ganon. Even yung sandals na ganito, yung open toe, kita yung kuko, nung time namin sa PLV, bawal talaga yung gano'n, gano'ng sandals. Kahit na maayos yung sandals mo, malinis, pero kung kita yung kuko, bawal. Okay, so in PLV, sabi nga natin, we are conservative. So makikita nyo with complete uniform, black shoes, ayan, makikita nyo. So even the ID laces, ayan po, makikita natin na kailangan sinusunod pa rin yung uniform o yung code natin when it comes to the uniform. Kasi nga, ayun. Even the hair must be black or without any color or any streaks, ganyan. Siguro sa inyo pwede ngayon kasi nasa bahay lang naman kayo. Pero pag pumasok na tayo sa PLV, malamang sa malamang kayo ay sasabihan ng OSA na ipa-black ang inyong hair. So, ayan. Sana next year or next semester, umokay ng lahat para makapagsuot na rin kayo ng uniform. Okay? Kasi again, it gives us a sense of identity kasi kultura nga yan. Next, what is culture shock? So, when we say culture shock, madali lang to eh. Ito na yung very self-explanatory na to. Culture shock, probably you have already experienced it at some point in your life. So, when we say culture shock, this is the negative feelings associated to anxiety. Bakit? Kasi merong loss of symbols and signs which you are familiar with. So, parang nangyayari, natatanggal ka dun sa kinasanayan mong lugar or sa nakasanayan mong lugar or natatanggal or naaalis lahat ng mga nakasanayan mo. Kaya parang naninibago ka. Yun yung tinatawag natin na culture shock. Yung parang sense ng paninibago. Okay? Culture shock is brought upon by the realization that there is a loss of sense or meaning. So, makikita natin doon na parang medyo medyo hindi natin ma-gets yung paligid kasi nga hindi ito familiar sa atin. So, again, loss of meaning and sense of alienation. So, rather, sense of alienation. When we say alienation, hindi ito yung pagiging alien. Okay? So, pag sinabi natin alienation, this is the sense of being out of place or the sense that you feel that you don't belong here. So, parang ganun yung sinasabi nating alienation. Why? Bakit tayo nagkakaroon ng sense of alienation? Because everything in the new culture is unfamiliar and foreign. So, we are totally new about this. So, we don't know anything about this yet. So, parang clueless tayo kung ano yon. Kaya parang nagkakaroon nga tayo ng negative feeling na, hala, ano to, hindi ko to alam. So, anxiety, ang tawag doon. So, we call that as culture shock. And culture shock, again, is the disbelief, disorganization, and frustration one experiences when he encounters new or foreign cultural patterns. Okay, so you have there culture shock. Now let's have comics about culture shock. So we have this person on the left offering, what is this? Deep fried crickets. So, ito ay insekto. Siyempre, etong tao na to, malamang sa kultura niya, hindi nila kinakain yung insekto. Siguro, naisip niya, bakit nila kinakain to? Ino-offer nila sa akin tong cricket. Eh, sa amin, pinapatay lang naman sa amin to. Okay, so, sa kanila kasi, normal na kinakain yung cricket. Sa kanila, never niya pang narinig yon. Siguro, meron, dito, magkakaroon siya ng culture shock na, dapat nila kinakain yon, di ba yung marumi? So, parang, may mga ganong klaseng frustration. Another one is, yeah, strangely, in the Bulgarian culture, okay? So in Bulgarian culture, so these are their gestures, okay? When they say no, they nod. And when they say yes, umiiling sila. Okay? So 'di ba, just imagine kung hindi kayo familiar sa ganitong klaseng, setup ta's may nakilala kayong Bulgarian, tapos hindi kayo magkaintindihan kasi nga iba pala yung culture nila. So, meron tayong culture shock, especially siguro ngayon, yung mga totally clueless talaga sa inyo. Ano niyo yun, first time yung malaman yun, siguro ma-shock kayo na, "Ay, may gano'n pala." So, paano kapag tinanong kayo ng Bulgarian na, "Have you taken a bath yet, since the last 3 days?" And then you answered, ay, mandidiri sa inyo yung Bulgarian kasi feeling niya hindi kayo naligo kasi sabi niyo no, okay? Pero you meant yes. Why? Kasi magkaiba kayo ng culture. What else? So, calling someone by their first name in Japan. So, ito, makikita natin dito, we have different cultures. For Japan, when you call someone by their first name, ibig sabihin kayo ay close, kayo ay mahalaga sa tao na yon, okay? So, kayo ay special someone, jowa, best friend, family member. So, doon kayo magtatawagan ng first name. Pero kung hindi naman kayo nandun sa level na yon, hindi nyo siya pa rin tawagin ng first name. Which is different in the culture of America or in the Western setting and as well as in our culture. Sa Pilipinas kasi kahit first day of school pa lang, pag nagpakilala, pwede mong tawagin sa first name eh. Pero sa Japan, hindi yun gano'n. 'Pag sinabing first name basis sa kanila, ito ay yung talagang kayo ay close na close na. So, magkaiba ng culture. Siguro para dun sa mga tao na first time lang malaman 'to, kasi ako mahilig ako manood sa anime kaya matagal ko ng alam 'to. Pero yung mga first time siguro malaman 'to, yun, may sense of culture shock pa din dun. Next, subculture. Dito tayo natapos nung nakaraan nung discussion. So, just to review, when we say subculture, to make it short, subculture is a smaller culture within a bigger and dominant culture. So, kumbaga, sa loob ng isang umbrella ng dominant culture or ng bigger culture, yung mga maliliit na culture na nasa ilalim nun or nasa loob nun, we call them as subcultures. Now, each of the subcultures have their own distinct identity, special languages, norms, values, and beliefs which are formed by the people who have similar tastes, similar goals, similar styles, and similar values. Okay? Let's jump to the example. So we have examples of a subculture which is the internet culture. The internet culture is of course a smaller culture kasi nga ang kadalasan lang na bumubuo ng internet culture ay yung mga Gen Z online. Okay? So hindi naman siya kultura ng lahat ng tao sa buong mundo. Kadalasan pag sinabing internet culture, ang mga members lang nito ay mga Gen Z na babad sa internet na laging nandun. Kaya nga nabuo yung concept na IRL or in real life. Okay? Kaya nga siya nabuo eh. Kasi nga, internet subculture has a different setup compared to the real life situations or real life cultures. So we have the use of emojis, we have the abbreviated words na hindi naman talaga natin ginagamit in real life. So halimbawa, yung gesture nga na ganyan, yung katulad nga sa example ko nung nakaraan. Internet culture okay lang to eh, na ginagawa nyo to. Pero kapag sa 'di ba, pag ginawa natin 'to in real life, halimbawa na ano kayo, tumatawad kayo dun sa tindera sa ukay-ukay. So, 150 yung benta, gusto niyong tawaran ng 100. "Ate, puwede po bang 100 na lang?" Puwede ba yun? Baka lalong dagdagan yung fee niyo, gawing 170 na yung babayaran ninyo 'pag gano'n. Kasi naiinis na sa inyo. So, ibig sabihin, there is a distinct characteristic or there is a distinct character in a subculture that you cannot really apply to the dominant culture. What are other examples? So, Bekimon. Sa atin sa Pilipinas, very distinct ang Bekimon. So, ito ay nabuo dahil sa mga bakla na meron sariling language at meron silang sariling style. So, makikita natin, yung mga bakla, pag gumagamit sila ng Bekimon, even other women na maraming friends na bakla, naintindihan din nila yung Bekimon, okay? Pero, makikita natin, sabi nga natin, so discussion natin nung nakaraan, the subculture cannot be an independent culture. Although the subculture has a distinct personality to it or distinct characteristic to it, it is still dependent to the bigger dominant culture. So, again, the term is subculture, not extra culture. Pag sinabi nating subordinate, ibig sabihin, nakadepende pa rin siya sa bigger dominant culture. That's why the Bekimon, although they have distinct language, it still follows the grammar, the structure, and tawag nito, the rules of the Filipino language, which is the mother language or kung ano man yung dahil siya yung pinanggalingan. So makikita natin doon na pinapalitan lang nila yung spelling, yung ibang terms pinapalitan nila pero nagfo-follow pa rin sila doon sa dominant culture. Again, because they are a subculture, they cannot live independently from the bigger culture. They still follow, okay? And lastly, Jejemon. So again, hindi na ako hihiwalay or hindi na ako lalayo. Sarili ko na gagamitin ko example. So ano ako nito, grade 6 or grade 5. Basta mga grade 6 or grade 5, ganyan. So makikita nyo na naman, mga Jejemon, alam naman natin lahat yan. Jejemon, may sarili silang spelling, may sarili silang words, may sarili silang expressions, may sarili silang fashion statement. Katulad na nakikita natin dito, nakasombrero ako sa loob ng bahay at meron akong panyo sa aking leeg. So, makikita nyo, di ba? Distinct, very unique, okay? So, again, these are parts of subcultures. Smaller culture within a bigger dominant culture. Next, ito yung hindi natin naabutan nung last time kasi naabutan tayo ng time limit. Okay, so we have ethnocentrism. From the words ethno, which means, syempre, ethnicity or race, okay, or culture. And when we say centrism, syempre, center. So, anong ibig sabihin nun? Your culture is at the center. So, to formally introduce ethnocentrism, this pertains to the tendency to see behaviors, beliefs, and norms of one's group as the only right way of living and judge others by those standards. So, nakikita nyo, pag sinabi natin ethnocentrism, feeling nyo, yung culture ninyo ay nasa gitna at umiikot ang buong daigdig sa kultura ninyo. Anong ibig sabihin nun? Umiikot yung buong mundo sa inyo. Ibig sabihin yung buong mundo yung mag-a-adjust sa inyo. So, ibig sabihin, kayo yung laging tama. When you say ethnocentrism, yung culture nyo ang laging tama. So, halimbawa, sabihin natin, ay, bakit ganyan yung ginagawa nila? Mali yan eh. Ganito yung ginagawa namin eh. Dapat ganito yung ginagawa nyo. Okay? So, you think that your culture is number one, your culture is the best, your culture is the standard of the only right way of living. Okay? Another, ethnocentrism is the fixation on one's own group or culture, believing that it is the best and other cultures are irrelevant and wrong. Pag hindi nyo kakultura, pag hindi nyo kaugali, hindi nyo kaparehas ng ginagawa, or hindi nyo kaparehas ng standards, mababang uri yon or irrelevant sila or wrong. Ganun yung ethnocentrism. Bilib na bilib kayo sa kultura nyo. Number one kayo lagi. Yung ibang mga kultura, invalid. Ganun sila. Okay? So, ethnocentrism is described as the maladaptation of being culture-centered. Pag sabi natin culture-centered, okay naman yun eh. Kasi ibig sabihin, sinasapuso mo yung kultura mo, inuuna mo yung kultura mo. Pero pag nasobrahan, yun yung tinatawag natin maladaptation. We call that as ethnocentrism. So what are the results? It results to negative outlooks toward other cultures for the reason that they are simply not like their own. Ayaw ko dyan. Kasi hindi yan kapares ng culture namin eh. Okay? Para mga ganon. Ethnocentrism has vast influence as it may go across races, regions, religions, traditions, etc. Okay, sometimes ethnocentrism pertains to the superiority of culture compared to other cultures, but sometimes it involves religion sometimes, okay? And lastly, ethnocentrism is compared to egocentrism in analogical manner. So in analogy, pagka individual, tingin ng individual na yon siya lagi tama, yung mga kaibigan niya dapat lagi nag-a-adjust sa needs niya, kung anong gusto niya, yun dapat nasusunod, egocentrism. Kapag naman cultural, feeling niyo yung culture niyo yung tama, lahat ng ibang kultura, mga ibang bansa, dapat kayo yung sinusunod, ethnocentrism. Okay? So, anong example nito? Ayan, comics. So, how do I get to the other side? And then, sabi ng isang manok, you are on the other side. So, ibig sabihin, hindi nila tinatanggap na sila yung sila yung nandun sa isang side. Hindi nila nakikita na magkaiba sila ng sides. Ang nakikita lang nila is, yung isa, hindi ko kasama rito. Kaya, ibig sabihin, hindi ko siya kauri, mali siya. Okay, parang ganon. So another example is, of course, religion. Always pertaining that they are right and others are wrong. So yun ay isang example din ng ethnocentrism. So the world according to Americans. We are not generalizing Americans. So to be specific, if you're familiar with Karens, yung mga Karen natin na Americans, yon ang example ng ethnocentrism, di ba? So we are America, we are number one. And actually, they are not acknowledging every Americans, like Mexican Americans, Filipino Americans, Native Americans. They are actually pertaining to white Americans lang. So, nilalait nila yung mga ibang bansa like yung mga evildoers, we have the communists for the China, yan. Tapos, they make our stuff, TVs and cameras, zoo animals from here. Parang masyadong inferior yung tingin nila sa iba. Why? Because they think that they are superior. Okay? So, that's what you call ethnocentrism. And ethnocentrism is the root of racism. Because kaya mo nilalait or minamaliit yung race nila or yung lahi nila is because you think that they are inferior compared to you because you belong to the superior culture. Okay? So that is ethnocentrism. Now, what about xenocentrism? If ethnocentrism is a belief that one's own culture is superior, then xenocentrism is the complete opposite of it. Pag sinabi nating xenocentrism, you believe that your own lifestyle, your products, your ideas, or in short, your culture is inferior compared to foreign cultures. Ang tingin mo naman sa sarili mong kultura, mababang uri. Yung mga foreigner, yung mga foreign na mga influences, sila ay the best. Sila ay mas maganda. Pag sinabing, ay, foreign, wow, nakakainggit naman. Nainggit ka lagi kasi feeling mo inferior yung culture mo sa kanila maganda. Xenocentrism pertains to setting a scale or standards for ways of living according to a foreign culture they fantasize about. So, they set their standards according to the standards of the foreigners. So, xenocentrism may exhibit the tendencies to dislike the individual's own culture but look up to a foreign culture which they think is in line with their own preferences. So makikita natin dito, they dislike their own culture but they like a foreign culture kasi feeling nila mas belong sila doon. Parang hindi sila nag-fit in sa culture nila kaya gusto nilang sumama doon. Okay? So, for example, we have Kojic soap. Hindi naman natin sinasabi na lahat ng nagko-Kojic soap ay xenocentric. Pero ang ibig nating sabihin, it may result to xenocentrism. Why? Depending on the motives. Bakit mo ba gustong pumuti? Dahil ba ayaw mo sa pagiging Pilipino mo? Gusto mo mas maging katulad ka ng mga iniidolo mo na mga foreigner? So, ganun ba yon? Kapag, depende dun sa motive natin kung bakit natin siya ginagamit. As well as yung bili ng mga foreign products. Hindi yung ibig sabihin, pag mahilig ka sa Oreo, ibig sabihin, sinocentric ka na or dinideny mo na yung pagiging Pilipino mo. Ang sinasabi lang natin dito, minsan, kapag bumibili tayo ng products, pagka may idea na kayo na ganito, ay, itong gusto kong bilhin kasi maganda to galing to sa ibang bansa. Pag sa Pilipinas kasi nang galing, bulok. Pag may gano'n na tayong connotation na kapag local products, bulok, hindi ka tiwa-tiwala, tas yung foreign products maganda, durable, mas angat, yun, medyo xenocentric na tayo sa part na yun, okay? And let's take a look at this comic. So the people asked the cashier, "Are you Filipino?" And then she answered, "Oh no, I'm Chinese, Spanish, Portuguese, Irish, Welsh, Mexican, Dutch, Scottish, Korean, Japanese, Hawaiian, but my parents are." So, kumbaga, 'di ba? Sinabi niya, yung mga parents niya ay Filipino, pero siya hindi. Ang dami niyang lahing iba. Bakit niya yun ginanon? Bakit pa niya, ang dami niya pang segue? It's because she's ashamed to show, or she's ashamed to admit that she is a Filipino. Okay, so this one is an example of xenocentrism. Ayan. Text, material versus non-material culture. This one is easy. When we say material culture, okay, as the name suggests, this is the tangible part of our culture, okay, or every culture. Tangible part. Nahawakan, okay? And it could be literally sensed by our five senses. So you can touch it, you can see it, you can hear it, you can smell it, you can taste it. But when we say non-material culture, this one is the intangible part. You cannot touch it, okay? And it cannot be literally touched, seen, heard, taste or smelled. So, yun yung pinagkaiba ng material versus non-material culture. So, example natin ng material culture, we have the pangablan. Pangablan ay yung yung kung saan naghahabi yung ating mga ninuno. Ayan, yung pinanggagawa na nila ng cloth. So, you call that as pangablan. So, yung pangablan ay isang example natin ng material culture. Syempre, kasi we can touch it. And of course, it's a part of our culture kasi nga gamit siya ng mga traditional weavers natin and ng mga ninuno natin. Simulang nung unang-una pa. And then we have the anitos or the bululs, 'di ba? Makikita natin na ito ay of course a part of our culture and we can touch it. So this is tangible and we can sense it by literally by our five senses. Now, what about examples of non-material culture? So non-material cultures are, or examples of non-material culture is the celebrations or the traditions that we have. Halimbawa, meron tayong yung um, undas. So, although nahawakan natin yung nicho, nahawakan natin yung mga alay, nahawakan natin yung kandila, pero yung mismong tradition, yung mismong undas, can we touch it? 'Di ba hindi? Non-material, okay? So, same, yung simbang gabi, nahahawakan niyo yung simbahan, nahahawakan niyo yung mga upuan, yung mga alay nahahawakan ninyo, si Father nahahawakan ninyo, pero yung mismong simbang gabi na concept, can we touch it? No. So, that is intangible. So, that is a part of a non-material culture.